let me go back and show you the information online. My colleague over here helped me out with this and showed me I wasn't even set up to do wireless just yet, so I thank you. As I go through this, if you see me fumbling around and you have the answer, please don't be shy. Let me know, all right? So that helps me trying to figure out what's going wrong. So I got to the website. So this is our website that we have for the class. Let me just show you all the information that's on here. Right now I have something called Contingency Plan for School Closures. These are all the announcements that are going to be there. You never know when we're going to have an ice storm, right? I mean, it was 70 yesterday. Today it's in the 30s. I don't think it's forecast ice, but who knows what's going to happen. If that happens, then I already have contingency plans about what we're going to do. Basically, we don't come to school that day, and I'll try to make up the material the next day. If you have a test that day, I'll just add another day onto the test. Or what I'll do is I'll just say, well, what we'll do is that we missed Thursday, but you still have through Monday to take it. But what I'll do is I'll always put an announcement up here to let you know. Okay? Also told you the other day that I'm one of these people that gets up really early, so I figure out if school is closed probably before you wake up. So what I'll do is I'll always put an announcement up here that says school is closed or whatever else. But these are various announcements that are up here. Something about email. Don't sneeze on the person next to you. You know, if you're sick, stay home. Here are the service learning opportunities I just talked about. One would be International Conversations Partner. Those are the other three that are on there, helping children read, stay in shape, and about mathematics. And there's a website that's there that you can go to that'll hook you up with all the other information in case you wanted to do one of these service learnings. If you do want to do a service learning, you need to sign up for it this week, okay, and get started in it. You can't wait until the mid-semester to do it. It needs to be done early. So all kinds of announcements on here. I'll post like little encouragement announcements. This is the 5th week of the semester. At this time, you should be doing X, Y, and Z. I'll also post an announcement on here about when I've put your grades online, okay, for you to go look at your line. So it's an important thing to check from time to time. If we go over to the blue tabs over here, this is where all your information is going to be stored. Here's your syllabus if you want to look at the longer version of it. Those of you, you're going to have to do that critical thinking essay, and you might want to cite sources. This is how to cite sources and a connection to do that if you're going to use references. Here's the service learning again, and I actually posted all the forms you need to sign up for them. I have the forms here for conversational partners, but these are the forms for all the other ones as well. You can go there for that. Publisher companion site, there's a website here, and if you get on the website and a dialog box will appear, it'll say, what do you want to do? Buy it. Don't buy it. Okay? Do the preview site for free, and it'll give you all this information to try to help you in terms of studying. Other information about internet addresses from the publisher. Once you start doing extra credit, and I'll show you how to do that as well, and you want to figure out how many extra credit points you've accumulated so far. The other day I said you just start doing the articles and you accumulate points, correct answers. Once you do, anybody do any of those yet? Nobody? Okay. You could start doing those if you want. Okay? Once you do those and you go into your My Grades section, under total points, it'll show you how many correct answers you've accumulated. Then if you want to know how many points you've accumulated so far, this is the chart that will help you with that. The chart will bring this up and it'll say if you did 10 correct answers, then you get this many extra credit points. All right, so you can look it up there. Here's a list of all the articles that I have listed. Thank you for telling her that. This is the court's document section. Someday you might want to do a replacement paper. Well, this is how to write the expectations for it. Here's a list of all the psychology self-help books you might want to read. You don't have to pick from this list for the replacement paper. Summary of introduction topics. There's a sex test in case you don't know how to have sex. You can take that test. When I do the chapter on human sexuality, I might ask you to do this test. Okay? Anyone gets 100 on the test, we want your phone numbers. No. Counseling Center skills seminars, those would be for extra credit. Those would be seminars you can go to for extra credit. They'll list it there. There's a stress test when we get to the chapter on that. Learning objectives, how to improve your reading. In case you have difficulty reading, that's ways to do that. When it comes time to take your test, I will bring test permission slips into class that you have to take to bring to the testing center. But if something happens, you lose it, you forget to pick one up, you can always go online and print one out yourself. Okay? That's a secondary issue that's there. I'm going to try to get tutoring for the class in case you need extra help, but I haven't set that up just yet, but I have it listed there. And then the last one would be open book lecture events, extra credit. If, again, you wanted to go to a lecture on campus, here are two that you can go to that are this week that you can go to and get extra credit for it by writing me up a 1 and a 1.5 page reaction, summary of what was going on, and then your reaction to it, what you learned. So do you see on your website, there's all kinds of information. So in case you say, gee, I don't know anything about that, go to the website first because there's all kinds of information. Now here's one that I think is really important. Course outlines. Now what you can do with this, here's your course outline for the first chapter we will be starting today. What I would do is I'd open this up. Okay. If you open it up, what it does, I have every outline for every lecture I'll be doing. What I would do if I was you is that I would open this up, okay? I'd save it on your hard drive, then I'd get into it, and I'd put spaces in between each one of these. So all you have to do is then bring it to class, sit down there with your outline, and then write some additional notes in between. Because what you're going to see today is that this is what I'm going to be talking about. That's my first slide. That's my second slide. Here's my third slide. But where it says a brief history of psychology, I didn't put it all in there, but I have about 7 or 8 comments I'm going to make. So you want to make enough spaces in between the outline where then you can just write in them. What that will do is help you, right, with your studying and taking notes. Instead of just writing down everything that's here, I already gave you the outline, bring it, put spaces in between different parts of that, and then you just fill it in with your notes. Is that helpful? That's very helpful. So just save it, put spaces in, print it off, bring it to class, and that should help you. All right, and I have one of those for each one of the classes. All right, so you go down through that list and you'll see one for each one. All right, that's course. Here's when you study for your exams, here's key terms for each one of your tests. So what I would do is 2 things. One, I'd open it up and print it out. Then I might want to just put it in my textbook. And every chapter I start reading, I might want to look at the key terms first and say, I better make sure I find where this is in the book. Okay, and then when you study for your exam, one of the things you might want to do is study your textbook, study your notes, but pull out the key terms and make sure you know that information as well. All right, here's where your extra credit is. So what you're going to do here is that you can open up this, you could do articles from any one of these groups, right? So let's just say you want to read the article on how to lift the mind. It's probably about depression. So you open it up and there's the article. So you're online right now. You read the article online. You are violating publishing rights, copyright laws if you print it out. Okay? But how do I know if you do that or not? Okay? So I just have to tell you, don't print it out. So you're reading the article online. So you're reading it. Wish you can read this fast, right? And then at the end of it, what you're going to do is take a quiz. I'm not going to get into this, but you open this up. It'll say, you're sure you want to take the quiz? You say yes. The quiz opens up. and then you answer the questions, okay, that are from the article that's there. Okay, you answer them, you click in whatever you think the answer is, you submit it, and then it'll grade it for you, and it'll show up how many you got correct in your My Grade section that's there. Okay? So all you're going to do is just read it. By the way, if you're looking at this article and you start reading it and you say, this is boring, I don't want to read this, well, then get out of it, right, and go back to another article. That's all, and choose a different one. Once you get into the test, though, you can't get out until you finish it. And you can only take the test once. So once you open up, you're in it. If your phone rings and you walk away and you get bumped off, you've been bumped out of the test. You can't get back into it. So make sure that you have some quiet and you're able to do those tests. All right, so there's about 100 articles that are there that you can do for extra credit. All right, so you'll do that. Okay, at the bottom of this is the essay that you have to do and the questions that you have to answer as well. What I'm going to do as the semester goes on, like this first one, identify research methods, need to accumulate data. What I'll do with that is after I finish this chapter, this is in chapter 1, probably on Wednesday or next Monday, I'll say, you know that essay you have to do? Let me tell you, okay, how you can answer that essay. So you might want to take notes when I say something like that, because whenever you get around to doing this, I've already given you the information. All right, so that's your assignment section. Your textbook, my contact number, classroom videos. All right, so there's the first one I did the other day, if you want to go back and review that. It's recorded class lecture number 1, syllabus. I have to look at this one. I may put another one in there about today's class, because this one is really about Introduction Chapter 1. So what this is, if they're all YouTube videos, so click on that, it'll bring you to the video, it'll open it up, and what it'll be, it will not be me, so you don't have to look at me, but what it'll be is everything I put up on the screen. Okay? Every overhead I put up, every slide, no matter what up there, with me then talking about it like I'm doing right now. Okay? That it's recorded. And I'll try to edit it, and then I'll put it online. Why do you want to look at those? For a review, maybe? Maybe you missed class. For a review. You only want to see a certain segment of it. Well, you know, on YouTube, it's sectioned out, and you can find the part you want to look at and review that way. Does that sound good? Okay, giving you lots of opportunities here to succeed. Additional web links that you can go into. Your tools section, that's where your My Grades is, and then back to the home page. All right? So we're set with that. All right. So we've already talked about how do we get to be who we are. The other day we talked about nature, nurture. What are some other ones that you might come up with, just to refresh your memories? What were some other ones about how influences and how you got to be who you are? Just somebody raised their hand. I was like, yeah. Environment. Somebody said the other day, you did. I think environment. Environment would mean, did you grow up in a suburb, a rural area, an urban area? I throw in culture that's there. I'd throw in ethnicity. I throw in what parts of the world you grew up in, right? That's there. What's another one in the back? I was going to say culture. Yeah, culture and subcultures as well. That's there. Somebody the other day said peers. Yeah, your friends have a great influence on you, right? What's another one? Genetics. There, we can't forget genetics. Okay, genetically predisposed. Did you know that some of you may be genetically predisposed towards depression? Depression runs in families. Schizophrenia, alcoholism. That's there. Happiness, shyness, okay? Altruism. I mean, there's all kinds of information that says that some of you may have a genetic, here's the key word, predisposition. Okay? Just because depression runs in your family doesn't mean you're going to be depressed. It's just that you may have a gene for it, but that gene may not be expressed because it takes the environment maybe to turn on that gene that's there. What else? One. Life experiences, right? Stuff that happens. We can use another word, right? Stuff that happens to you in your life, and then how you perceive it and your reaction to it. Good. Yeah, media, social networks, entertainment centers, television, radio, on and on would have an influence. What you listen to.
Faith or religion.
The what?
Faith or religion.
Yeah, faith and religion, the types of religion you were brought up with, and how deeply faithful you are in that.
Would all those fall under nurture?
All that would fall under nurture, right? Nurture, right? Right. That would be the whole environment section. That's there, right?
White noise, maybe?
White noise, maybe, yeah. You know, there is white noise in here. White noise is just in the background. In fact, there's a heater going, right? And what's fascinating, when we cover the chapter on sensation, and hopefully this will happen, I'll be talking, and if the heater goes off, everybody will go, what just happened? Even though we're not paying attention to it, things happen. Stuff in the background that you may or may not perceive. What else? Communication. Yeah, how you communicate, what you listen to, what you don't listen to, which leads us to a discussion on perception, how perception may affect how you got to be who you are. Education, right? How much did you get? Didn't you get? What schools you went to? Wow, there's a lot of variables, aren't there? The advice that's given to you, whether you have someone who gives you good advice or bad advice, someone who's tutored you, expectations on you. You get this? We can do this for hours, all right? So when we ask the question, how do we get to be who you are, what the influences are, whoa, there's massive number of those. No wonder why we're all so unique and so different, right? So when psychologists, try to do research, what we do is we ask the question, how do we get to be who we are? We ask the question, what do we wonder about? Then we try to do research. But the research we do is very, very difficult, and we can never say 100% of the time this is why you got to be who you are, because there's so many different variables. And when I discuss this chapter, I'll explain this to you a bit more. Some demographic information just to show you who's in this class, but also how to use these clickers. All right. So what it'll do, it'll show me how many people got right. Very good. You all got one right. Now, how old are you? If you're 16 to 18, you press 1. 19 to 21, 2. 22 to 29, 3. 30 to 39, 4. 40 to 49, 5. 50 or above, 6. What do you think? We got anybody 16 or above in here? Well, see. My other class, I had 2 people. Old people. Everybody got that one? All right, so I have 62 people answered, so I'm ready to show you what the answers are. So I have 21% of the people are 16 and 18 years old, but the majority of you are 19 to 21. Do you know if I was doing this class at night, this whole chart would go over a little bit more, because the average age at night is in the late 20s for students at night that's there. So the oldest people I have in here are 30 to 39, okay? That's there. So basically a pretty young class that we have. Now, where were you born? Were you born in the United States, Mexico, Central America, South America, Africa, Asia? Now, I know South America, Africa, and Asia, continents, they're pretty large. I can't subdivide those because I don't have that many, so these are always the most popular ones that are on there. I do know that India and Pakistan have fought wars with each other, but I'm just trying to combine you two together because I get quite a few of those people that are there. I know the Middle East is always in turmoil, but I'm trying to get you people together too at once. So the Middle East, Europe, Australia, I got just about everywhere except for Canada. Okay, anybody from Canada? Born in Canada? No. Last semester, I had one person from Canada, and she raised her hand. She said, "You don't have me on here." I go, "Well, where are you from?" Canada. I went, "You're right, I don't. Sorry." Okay, so, well, let's see where you people were born. Majority of you in the United States, so 65% of you, 13% from Mexico, 7% from Asia. I got 3% from Europe, 3% from South America. Wow, we got people from just about everywhere, with the exception of the Pacific Islands and the Middle East. Pretty diverse group of people that we have there. Get to know some of these people. Like I said the other day, maybe get to be good friends with them, and they say, hey, come on back. I'm going back to the Ukraine during the summer. Come on with me. I don't know if you want to go to the Ukraine. They have a lot of problems right now. But. All right, what's your lifestyle? Okay, are you married? Are you single? Are you divorced? Are you living with somebody, cohabitating, you and that person? Now, these other two I've added over the years because someone always said, you don't have me on here. Okay? Exclusive means basically you're not living with the person, you're going out with them, and you have an exclusive relationship. You're not going out with anybody else. That domestic partners mean that you're gay and lesbian living with somebody. In Texas, it's not, we don't have legal gay marriage or anything, so we call that domestic partners. All right, you figure out what you're doing, okay? If you're living with the person next to you, if you're in a committed relationship, exclusive relationship with the person sitting next to you, you want to make sure you both wrote that down. You may think you're in an exclusive relationship, but the other person's going, no. What do we got? We got 63% of you single, or maybe we should set up a dating organization in here. Quite a few of you are exclusive, probably one or two individual domestic partners. Some of you are married, but most of you are single. All right, so we'll find out who's around here. These other questions now have to do with academic performance. How many hours a week do you work? By the way, also, I'm teaching you how to use these, right? So now you're getting a good feel of how to use these. I always find this fascinating about how many hours people work. All right, we all got that? By the way, at any time you can always change your answers. Today I'm going to be lecturing a little bit, then I'll stop and I'll give you like a little question and see if you're paying attention. At any time you can always change your answer until I say, all right, all answers in. Then once I say that, you can't change your answer. All right, so all answers in. All right, so a whole range of people, right? 15% of 30 to 39 hours. You people work a lot. 24% of you don't work at all. Wow. You people better do real well in this class. Because the 30% of the people that are working 30 or 40 hours or more, they don't have as much time to devote to the class than you people do. You got a lot of time to devote to this class, so I hope you do real well. You people are busy, though, aren't you? Look, 75% of you work some hours that are there. So it's hard to work and go to school, okay? Some of you are married. I didn't even ask you questions. Next question is about children, okay? I'm a custodial parent, yes or no. Custodial parent means you legally have your child living with you. Some of you are custodial parent, are a parent, but you're not custodial. They don't live with you, all right? They don't live with you. So are you a parent? Aren't you a parent? So if you're working 40 hours a week and you're a parent and you're going to school full time, when do you have time to sleep? You people are busy that way. I hope you're able to balance all of this off. What do we have here? We've got 87% of you are not parents, right? Only 13% are. Okay? This is an interesting question that correlates with academic success. So before you answer this, let me explain it. Okay? What we're going to do is that what's your family education background? Are you a first-generation college student, which means none of your nuclear family, biological mom and dad, okay, have gone to college? All right? So when you answer this, let's think of biological parents. Right? Father, mother, biological parents. One of those parents attended college, one parent graduated from college, both parents attended college, both parents graduated college. I recognize we live in a society, we have a lot of people who've divorced, and you have step-parents, and you have blended families, and if I ask one parent of any of the above, it gets too confusing, right? So let's just do one biological parent, okay? And answer the question that way, one or two, whatever the answer is. All right, we got that answer? All answers in, 62, got it all. Let's see what we got. 48% of you are first-generation college students. You know what the correlation is with academic success? Not very good. Did I scare you? I hope so. What correlation means is not causation, though. You understand that? Just because your parents never went to school doesn't mean you're not going to do well. It's just a correlation. I'll explain that when I get to the section on research. But you compared to the 21% where both parents graduated, you first-generation people don't have any role models, okay? Don't have any mentors. Don't have people who understand what it's like going to college. And the big one is there's not a lot of expectation that's there. Not a lot of expectation, which is kind of sad, right? Because you'll come home from college and they'll go, oh, what was college like? What's going on? Okay, you really want to go? Now, hopefully your family goes, oh, we're so proud of you. You're going to be the first generation. It's so great. And they help you with that and they support you. But what we know is that if you haven't experienced it, that sometimes there's no support that's there. My daughter came home once in 5th or 6th grade or 7th grade, I don't know what it was, and she was mad. She came home and said, Daddy, you lied to me. And I said, whoa, what do you mean? I try not to lie. What do you mean? Well, the school counselor came in, okay, and said, how many people in the class are thinking about go to college? And my daughter, who's extroverted, said, we have to. And the counselor said, no, you don't. She said, my dad said I had to. She said, you don't have to go. So she came home and said, Dad, you lied to me. You said I had to go. I said, yeah, so. What I'm doing is building expectation. All right? Mom and Dad went, so are you. Okay? Building expectation that's there. Have you ever looked at the guidelines for Texas schools where they give school districts, and they stopped this year, but they have some other type of rating. But the rating used to be exemplary school district, very good, average, below standards. Did you ever read any of that or know any of that? Well, in the North Texas area, not in 2013, but in 2012, when I looked this up, there were only 3 school districts, okay, that got the exemplary rating. Now think about what variables might be important for these 3 school districts. 1 was Highland Park, 2 was Carroll, which is in Southlake, Carroll, and the 3rd one was Lovejoy, which I think is a suburb of maybe Allen or something like that. Now Frisco was pretty high, but they weren't exemplary at that time either. What's a corresponding variable? She did it with her hands, right? Money. They're all not wealthy school districts, but the families who live in those school districts are wealthy. So what happens is they may have money for tutoring and things like that. But when you look at that, you correlate making money with college degrees as well. So then what you're looking at is expectations. When people go to those schools, it is expected that they're going to go to college, 1. 2, their parents probably did, so they expect it. The school district does, the community does, so the expectations are you're going to succeed. I'm very sorry to say, because I've been to a lot of your high schools, going to the high schools, I've done workshops with teachers and things like that. Sometimes you sit in the teacher rooms, okay, and you hear the teacher say, what's the crop like this year? Same as the one last year. Matter of fact, I think they're getting worse. Okay, a bunch of mouth breathers, that's all they are this year. Hopefully we get through and they don't get into too many fights and graduate. Hopefully they at least graduate. What's the expectation level, right? It's kind of like, just get them out of here. Okay, that's not very high. And what winds up happening, sometimes that becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. I don't have expectations for you, so why should you? So first generation sometimes doesn't have the support of the school districts, the people, the families, and on that they should have. I hope you don't. And if your families go, I don't know why you're going, but go ahead. Then you go, yeah, I think I will. Okay? I'm going to succeed. Expectations are really important. That's what you're going to try to drive for, what your dream is. I want to do this. So I hope you all, the grade I want to attain is what? A, B, C? Oh, please, just let me pass. I don't know what to tell you, right? I don't know. You know, this is brand new. It's a brand new semester, a brand new school for some of you, brand new opportunity. Okay, I hope you all. All right, 92%. Good. All right. Right, I hope you have that. I'm going to back this up again. The other day I said people who are successful take advantage of opportunities when they present themselves. Okay, so I got lots of opportunities for you. Preparing for class, I've got outlines, I got videos for you. All right, grading, I got replacement papers, I got 5 tests. Okay, that's there for you. Right, I got extra credit for you to do. I got all sitting in class, just warming up a seat, coming to class, paying attention, answering the questions as I give it to you. You can accumulate points as well. So, we excited? First, second class, you should be able to do this. We'll see. I have faith in you. I believe in you, all right? I do. I have high expectations for you, and I'm going to try to make this as easy as I possibly can. When I give you at the end of class, the very last class day, the last thing we're going to do is I'm going to give you an evaluation of me, the class, the school, the textbook, and on and on. One criticism I do get, which I'll take, is this class wasn't that challenging to me. Well, what I'm going to do is this class will be as challenging to you as you want it to be. Okay? However, it's not that challenging because I'm going to try to make it as easy as I possibly can for you to do well. Okay? So let's aspire. All right, are we ready? We're starting the class, finally. I'm starting the note-taking. Here we go. The other day I asked you this question, right? Didn't I say, what is psychology? And some of you gave me some definitions that were there. Well, let's continue this. What is psychology? Psychology is the scientific study of behavioral mental processing. So we're going to study why you do the things you do, and we're going to study the way you think about it. The other day I mentioned that psychology is moving more and more into how the brain works. And when we answer the question, what are the influences on you? How'd you get to be who you are? A lot of the answers is it's going to be based on this is how your brain works. This is how your brain works. I mentioned the other day that if you were a psych major at a major university, you would not be sitting in this class. You'd be taking Introduction to Neuropsychology. That'd be your first class you'd be taking. We don't offer that here. Okay? Because that's how much psychology is beginning to study the brain and how it influences you. Big, big direction in that. Those of you who are interested in the sciences or biology, but you're also interested in people, that might be a fascinating field to get into. Whether you approach it from the biological standpoint, neuroscience, or you approach it from the psychology standpoint, neuropsychology. That is the future when we look at human beings. All right, psychology is based on empirical evidence. What does that mean? I'm going to give you research. I don't make this stuff up. Okay? I'm going to tell you this is what the research indicates. You ask me a question, I'll usually say this is what the research indicates. So it's going to be based on empirical evidence gathered through scientific methods. When I answer your questions, psychologists give tendencies. If you say to me, Steve, why does that person do X, Y, and Z? My answer will be, well, the research indicates there's a tendency that the person does this way. A tendency. I can never say I'm 100% accurate. Why? Because of all the variables we just came up with before. It's never 100%. You can't control all those variables with human beings. We're going to discuss variables that contribute to explanations of human behavior. Why did you do the different things you do? Well, here are the variables why. Right? It's because of your brain, genetics, environment, nature, nurture, biochemistry, many, many different things. Moving right along, goals of psychology. See, now, if you printed out that outline, a lot of this is written for you already, and then you just fill it in. What do we do in psychology? We describe. We name and describe information based on detailed records. Let me describe for you what it's like to be a schizophrenic. Okay? Let me describe to you why people sit in certain parts of this classroom might do better than people sitting in other parts of this classroom. I'll get to that, okay? That's a description. In psychology, we try to understand human behavior. Let me explain an event, why the behavior occurred. Based on research, let me give you the research why a mother may kill her children. Oh, it makes me shudder to think about that. Okay? That does happen, though, doesn't it? Yeah. So if you ask me why, I'm going to try to explain the event so we can understand why that person does that. Most of the time, by the way, those people are psychotic. Okay? They're psychotic. Excuse me?
And religion, like in the Middle East, like a lot of people kill girls because, like, in the Muslim culture, it's like men are more dominant.
Right. Well, it's not just there. There are other parts of the world as well that do that. Culturally, we would explain it that way. Right? Prediction. Maybe I can predict human behavior, why people are going to do certain things, to forecast behavior accurately. I don't think I mentioned this to you the other day, but I was a practicing therapist. I just retired in November. So I was a therapist since the mid-'70s. So I just retired. Not doing that anymore. But at one time I used to do premarital counseling. And what we used to do is you'd come in and say, well, I want to make sure, we're okay for each other. We're going to make this work. So I'd say, okay, well, I can do that with you. I'd give you a battery of psychological tests. I'd sit down, interview you. Then I'd interview your potential spouse. Then I'd bring the two of you together and give you some different things to do, problems to solve and stuff, so that I can watch you interact. Then at the end of that, based on what? Research and observation. My observation is based on research, okay? That's there. Then I can say to you, nah, get rid of him. That's never going to work. Yeah, I wouldn't say that. But what I did say was like, you know what? The prediction is that you're going to have difficulty. And let me tell you why. Okay? That's there. And I can give you research why. What I usually would do is I wouldn't do that boldly. What I would say, these are your strengths and how I think your marriage is going to do real well. And these are some things you need to look out for. Okay? And I'm pretty good about predicting that stuff. At least I was when I used to do that. Okay? But what is it based on? It's based on research, predictions. Control. What we try to do in psychology is teach you how to manage your lives, altering conditions that affect behavior. Do you want to be a better parent? Well, let me show you how to control that. You want to be a better student? Well, let me help you do that. Because what do practicing psychologists do? We help people to help themselves, right? So that would be the control factor that's there. Still with me? Right? You people are attentive. All right. I need to keep this room cold to keep everybody awake. All right. So now what we're going to do is we want to talk about the history of psychology. How can you start any discipline without talking about where we get started? Psychologists like to think of ourselves as scientists, okay? If you talk to your biology instructor, your chemistry instructor, they'll go, psychology? That's not a real science. No way, okay? But we use the scientific method that's there. However, we're just a baby science. We didn't come about, okay, until the late 1800s. Now, biology, chemistry, physics, they were around long before we were, hundreds of years, right before we were. Matter of fact, the first group of people who actually did psychological experiments were not psychologists because there weren't any schools of psychology. The first person to do experiments on humans, in human behavior, was a fellow by the name of Wundt. And he was one of the first people to develop the experimental side of psychology. And he is considered to be the father of psychology. The father of psychology. Because he did the first experiments. And he didn't do anything really fascinating. What he did was he wanted to understand how people see, hear, smell, and taste. He did research on the senses, so he brought humans into his lab to do studies on that. The beginning of studies on human behavior. Okay? validated studies. People have been doing studies all the time. If you really want to think about psychology, though, what do you think? No one has ever thought about why we do the things we do? Of course, human beings have always thought about that, right? So if we go back in time, back in the history of psychology, what we find that really the first people that answered the question, how do we get to be who we are, who are we, were really the theologians, religious people, right? When they first started thinking, who am I? Where did I come from? Where am I going? Human beings first came up with what? Religions to answer that question. Who made me? God made me. Okay? Where am I going? Hopefully to heaven. Okay? Or wherever else. Why am I here? To serve God. Okay? How did I get to be who I am? Because you were made in God's image. Okay? They were the first ones to answer that question. So the theologians, and by the way, if you read your great religious books, whether it be the Quran or the Bible or whatever other book that you use, a lot of those books are about what? How to be a good person. This is what you should be doing. So really, they're one of the first psychological self-help books, okay, that were out there about how to live your lives. So the theologians start out. And then when people started separating away from theology and said, they don't have all the answers, then people like the philosophers came along and they said, who am I? Where am I going? Okay, where did I come from? They answered it in a non-religious way, okay, in a non-religious way, based on whatever their philosophies were. So we could say that psychology has a foundation in theology, philosophy, and then biology, chemistry. That's there. That's our long history that's there. So Wundt was the father of psychology. Now, let me take an aside here for a second to say that a lot of you are very intelligent. Wonderful, great. But intelligence may not correlate with good grades. Sometimes you just have to be a good student. And good students figure out the instructor, okay? They figure out what kind of questions he or she may ask on the test. If I ever say something like, watch my nonverbals, the father of psychology, Wundt, W-U-N-D-T, and I say it 2 or 3 times, make sure you write that down because it'll probably be on your test. Because what I do at the beginning of each week, this morning, I look at my exams, I look at all of my PowerPoints, and I make a conscious note, I better make sure I cover this because it's going to be on the test. Then as I start talking, I may forget that and it becomes unconscious, but my nonverbals, okay, may give it away. Right? You're watching as well as listening. A good student also says, how could he ask that question on the test? Let me see if I can prepare myself to do that. He could say what? Who was Wundt, the father of psychology? Who was the father of psychology? Wundt. Who was the one that did the first psychological experiment? Was Wundt. So what I'm going to try to do is to outthink me and say, how could he turn this material into a question? And when you do that by yourself, you're studying. You're studying. Okay? You're getting that into your memory. So I know each and every one of you, when you get home today, are going to go over your notes. And when you go over your notes, try to turn it into potential questions. Repetition is what gets things stored in memories. Okay? Another person who actually was a student of Wundt, because Wundt was this very famous experimenter, was a fellow by the name of Titchener. Titchener was trained as a chemist. Okay? He had training as a chemist. And what he wanted to do was study human behavior in regards to the elements of what he called was consciousness. Elements, chemistry, elements. Thinking along with me? Elements. Do you remember the periodic guide to elements? Right? There's what? All the different elements, hydrogen and oxygen. You put 2-part hydrogen with oxygen, H2O, you get water. So what Titchener was trying to do is develop a huge map of the elements of human behavior. Therefore, he could say, if I can figure out who you are, if I put this element here and mix this one here and mix this one there, then it'll be you. So he tried to do that. He didn't get very far. Why? Because in nature, there's only a certain number of elements, right? But in human behavior, there are thousands of different elements. He just couldn't do it. But he was along the right track because he was trying to quantify how we got to be who we are. Titchener, structuralism. Then we have a fellow by the name of James come along who developed something called functionalism. He said, let's study the functions, how people do the things they do, rather than just the elements, because the elements are too difficult to do, the functions. So how do we learn? Education psychology. What's the best way to perform work? What's the best way to dig a ditch? Okay, it's called industrial psychology. Let's look about how kind of work should people do. Let's study the criminal mind, the function of the criminal mind, called forensic psychology. Let's study schizophrenia, okay, clinical psychology. Let's see if we can help people change their behavior, counseling psychology. Okay? So what James said was that psychology can be broken down into individual functions, then we can study the functions of psychology. So James did studies in classrooms, educational psychology. What's the best way to learn? Well, back then in the early 1900s, the best way to learn, the only way they taught, was through rote. What we're going to do is we're going to learn our multiplication tables. So everybody say it with me. So everybody in class like, oh, 2 times 3 is X, 2 times 3 is X, 2 times 3 is 6. Okay? Then the teacher would stop and say, all right, what's 2 times 3? And you say 5. I'd say, no, give me your hand. Whack! Okay, go. 2 times 3 is 6. What's 2 times 3 is 6? 7. No, whack! Okay? Because what they also thought was that if you use corporal punishment and you hit somebody or punish them, then that would shake up their brain and they'd learn better. Well, for that person, I just got a sore hand. That's there. But James went, I don't know if that's right. Let's see if we can do studies on the best. Let's do 3 people. I'll whack you if you get it wrong. You 3 people, I'll say no. But let's try to do that again. 2 times 3 is really 6, isn't it? It's like, oh, good job. Here's a piece of candy. Okay? Let's try to do it in different ways, and let's figure out what's the best way to learn. Okay? So what he developed was research methods to the best way we can learn. Let's study the functions of psychology. He was along the right track. Okay? Therefore, now in psychology, we have many, many different fields of psychology. School psychology, educational, counseling, clinical, forensic, industrial, organizational, many different fields of psychology. Another person was called the Gestaltists by Wertheimer. They were very, very different. What they said, psychology should be the study of perception and how we think. These are the people that showed us that each and every one of you perceive the world differently. How do you view the world? Believe this or not, each and every one of you is sitting in this classroom perceiving what's going on in a different way. That's weird. How do we ever communicate if we perceive differently? Well, it's difficult for us to communicate. Perception, how do we view the world? And let's study what? How people think about things. They cannot be understood by breaking the human being into individual parts. What I need to do is study you in totality, not individual parts that are there. The sum is greater than its parts. For 1 point, this is the participation part of the class. See if you were listening to me. For 1 point, who was the father of psychology and the founder of the first psychological lab was who? Wilhelm Wundt, press 1, John Watson 2, Sigmund Freud 3, or Edward Titchener 4. So I'll give you a question. This is like a little pop quiz to see if you learned. If you get this question right, you get another point today. All right, so Everybody got that answer in? Everybody's answer's in? Going once, going twice? All answers in? Okay. And the answer, and 100% of you, God, can you imagine if you were wrong? The answer is Wundt. Right. Yay! So far you're 2 for 2. You're here today for 1 point, and you got 1 question right. So throughout the semester, I'll say now for a point. Let's see if you're paying attention. So that means you need to pay attention, right? If you drift off, you may have lost a point. All right, continuing on, the brief history of psychology. In the 1920s, 1930s, recognize I'm not really putting dates with these people. I don't think dates are all that important. They were all a long time ago, though, all right? In the 1920s, 1930s, a fellow by the name of Sigmund Freud came along. Boy, talk about a person who was influential. Way back in the year 1999, when we were approaching the year 2000, there were all these books and articles that came out about who were the most influential people of the 1900s. Okay? Sigmund Freud was always in the top 10. Every single list I looked at, always in the top 10. Why? Because he revolutionized the way we think about psychology. In the way we think about psychology and human behavior, okay, when he wrote his information, that information then went out into the world and it changed humanities. It changed art, it changed music, it changed theater, it changed literature. All because Freud said, no, let me tell you about human behavior. It just opened up a whole new way of looking at the world. Sigmund Freud said, we need to understand your unique personality. Now, people have been talking about this for centuries, but Freud was the first one that really borrowed from the Greeks, okay, and talked about psyche or personality, that every single one of you have a unique personality. Now, you and I would go, duh, of course we do. Well, they didn't necessarily believe that back then. Freud was the first one to talk about that. Understand personality by understanding the underlying drives and motivations that shape it from childhood. Freud was the first one that said that as an adult, what happened in your childhood was going to make you who you were today as an adult. Now, you and I, once again, would say, duh, of course we know that. They didn't believe that back then. They believed that when babies were born, their full personality was laid down, and there was not much you can do to change that. Therefore, we put children to work, we expose them to severe, dangerous situations. Doesn't have any effect on them. Okay? They just are who they are. When Freud came along, he said, no. Okay? You can directly go back and understand what happened in your childhood, which is a direct link to how you become as an adult. And what happens is you have these underlying drives and motivations that are unconscious to you. He was the first one that says there's stuff that goes on in our brain that we're not aware of. We all have these underlying drives and ambitions and unconscious desires that are there that make us who we are. Real strange stuff that he came up with. Very strange stuff. Matter of fact, I'd say that Freud was probably the father of modern day psychology. Okay? The real father of psychology is Wundt. But if I ever ask you a question about the modern day father of psychology, it'd probably be Freud. Okay? Now, John Watson, who developed behaviorism, lived around the same time as Freud, and he'd read Freud's work, and he'd say, God, this is fascinating stuff. Where does this man come up with this stuff? I think he's on drugs. This is really weird stuff, he said. He says, this is too weird for me. He said, you know what? With the study human behavior, to do it correctly, you really need to observe behavior, not this consciousness stuff, this underlying drives that are there. He said, the way you got to be who you are is strictly how you behaved as a child. He borrowed that from Freud. But it said it's just the way you get conditioned. If you're a liar, you grew up being reinforced to be a liar. You told a lie and you got away with it. And you did it again and again and again. So it's all observable behavior. If you're a truthful person, you lied, you got caught, you got punished. You told the truth, you got rewarded. So all we are little dogs and monkeys, okay, that were trained to be who we are. That's all it is. What's Freud? Freud did too much cocaine anyway. By the way, he did. Okay, so now I want to talk about how no one's perfect, unless you people are. I should use that as one of the opinion questions right now. Am I perfect? You can vote if you are. No one's perfect, right? No one is. Everybody's got issues, okay? Freud, when cocaine came to Europe, got a hold of it and went, wow, this is good stuff. Helps me write. He thought it was so wonderful, he gave it to his patients. Freud, by the way, also was one of the first people to do psychotherapy, okay? He gave it to his patients. He brought it home to his mother. Gave it to his mother. Did cocaine with his mother, okay? By the way, cocaine wasn't illegal. Cocaine really was the real thing. It was in Coca-Cola. Coca-Cola, okay? It had cocaine in it, on and on and on. He thought it was great. Then he realized how addictive it was, okay? And he actually tried to go back. Back then they didn't have the internet, and he wrote papers. He tried to buy back all the papers that he presented from places. So he had issues that are there. However, he was a good guy, all right? He was a brilliant guy, okay? But he had issues about addiction. I think he also had an overly fond memories of his mother. When we get into his research and everything, too, he's probably a little too close to her, okay? Nothing sexual, I mean that. But what he was talking about is just the way he was raised, okay? Probably had a very dominant father, and mother was very passive but very loving and caring. Watson said, this guy's weird, okay? So we need to observe behavior. But Watson was not the most ethical person in the world. Watson used psychology to manipulate people. Story about John D. Watson. Watson once made a statement, give me your child and I'll make your child whoever I want them to be. I'll tell the story real quick. So this mother, who was one of his students, said, here's my child, okay? And Watson just said, watch, I'm going to make this child be fearful of white coats. You have on a white furry coat. I'm going to make that child fearful of coats. So he said, give me a child. Took the child, brought in, what happens, he brought in a little white hamster for the child to play with. He was playing with the little white hamster. He'd come up behind the child. Every time he grabbed the hamster, he'd make a loud noise behind the child. Ah! So the child would touch the hamster and go, ah! And be shocked. Touch the hamster, ah! And start developing what? Anxiety. Then he pulled out the hamster, brought in a little white mice, did the same thing. Then brought in a little white rabbit, did the same thing. Then he brought in a coat just like his mother's. Okay, did the same thing. Frowning took the child, brought the child back, okay, to the mother. The mother wore the same white jacket, came in, the child looked at the mother and went, and started screaming. And he said, you see, he doesn't love you anymore. And the mother went, well, what do you mean? I can do whatever I want to do. I can train her. So the mother went, well, that's not fair. Change it. And he went, nah, I don't do changes. A little unethical. He did that numerous times to other children. They eventually fired him. Okay? He goes to the next place, decides he wants to study human sexuality. 1916, 1918, right? Victorian era, women were wearing dresses like fully covered during that time. He went to his wife and said, I want you to come into the lab and we're going to have sex and I want my graduate students to watch us and report what's going on. She went, no way. She said, I asked. Okay? So then he went and hired people to come into his lab and have sex. I think they call those prostitutes. Okay? And recorded that behavior, got fired. Okay? Eventually wound up in New York City, opened an office on Madison Avenue, and went around to companies, said, I can increase your sales, and you don't have to pay me anything until your sales increase, what, 1%, 5%, 10%, then you pay me. Would you do that? And they went, yeah, sure, I'll do that. John Watson was one of the developers of advertising and how to manipulate people to buy things that they don't necessarily need, okay? brand identity, and on, was one of the developers of advertising, using psychological aspects, okay, conditioning people to buy things, right? Advertising. The clothes you have on because you wanted to buy them, right? I like these clothes. No, you don't. You were manipulated into buying it. Someone told you it was important, okay? You got sold to this. John Watson, okay? Not the most ethical man, but he was a pretty brilliant guy.